Hey, good afternoon. Stuart and I were having a conversation about, we've all seemed to have written for the Atlantic around here, including Pete Hegseth. Um, if you haven't seen the unbelievable story from Jeffrey Goldberg today, when we finish this up, I want you to go and read it word for word because during the planning for the strike on the Houthis in Yemen, the senior most national security officials in our country were using their personal cell phones and Signal to plan and execute a military operation at enormous risk to the lives of our men and women in uniform who conducted those raids and those attacks. It is so beyond the valley of of criminality and callousness that we were like, we're going to go on live. We're going to talk about this right now because in a just world, all these motherfuckers would go to jail. When I had clearances at a senior level, if I had posted my shit on non-classified systems and talked about how we were going to run an operation in non-classified systems, I would have gone to jail. I'm on a list, an email list of a bunch of former senior military and defense officials and intelligence guys, and every one of us today was just like, this is beyond comprehension. But Stuart, let's talk about this for a minute because I'm not outraged enough yet. I feel like this is I feel like I'm really mad, but I'm also like I'm stunned that that these people just don't have any belief that the law applies to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most disturbing, which is a pretty stiff competition here among what is most disturbing,
Right.
is it just reflects the entire shambolic, stupid uh,
Sloppy.
apparatus of the America's national security now. I mean, if I said to you, the people that invited Jeffrey Goldberg to one of their top secret planning missions for a strike in another country also want to invade Canada and
And
also want
Greenland.
to invade Greenland, you wouldn't go, "Oh, dude, that's absurd." No, it
No.
all fits together in a plan of these are careless people. They're not serious people. They
No.
are people who never were involved in government to do good, to protect the
Right.
Constitution, to uphold an oath of office. They're in it out of anger, bitterness. In the case of Marco, I mean, he's just this broken man.
Ugh.
And the man who broke him, sort of tossed him a bone. It really, when you think about the great Secretary of Defenses we've had, when you think about the greats that we've had in our national security apparatus protecting
Sure.
the country, and then you look at this just clown car of people who, and if we're looking at this, how are the Chinese looking at it? How are the Russians looking at it? How are
Stuart,
the Iranians looking at it?
this
I
this
mean, right
this is a
now,
point I
you don't want to be an Iranian National Guard intelligence operator because they're going to be saying, "How come you weren't as good as Jeffrey Goldberg?
right.
Why is it
I mean, Stuart,
you
I was thinking
haven't
about this
gotten top
earlier.
secret?"
I was thinking about
Uh,
this earlier. Folks, you should understand something. The Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians are quite good at intelligence gathering. They are peer competitors to us in cyber warfare. All of them, including the Iranians. The Russians are very good at this. The Chinese are very good at this. The Iranians are very good at this, and they're all helping the Houthis. And the fact that these sloppy, drunk dumbasses did this on Signal. Guys, even though Signal is a great app, and I love Signal and I use it every day and I rely on it for a lot of things, it is not military grade encryption with the systems that surround the rest of the encryption. So the metadata off of these idiots' personal cell phones was being fed back through the Chinese program called Salt Typhoon to the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians. They were getting the metadata. So they knew all these fucking morons were communicating with each other. They may not have seen the messages, but metadata tells us what it is. They were using personal cell phones. So there's high side and low side in military communications. High side communications work on a couple of different systems, NiperNet, CyberNet, that are there to transmit through very secure electronic systems encrypted messages. Your phone is encrypted only so far. These guys in China and Russia and Iran knew what they were seeing. I promise you. I am shocked that they weren't able to deploy enough resources to shoot down more American planes when they were dropping the bombs and firing the missiles at these people. That we didn't put more lives in danger. We got very lucky this one time. And Stuart, I mean, I'm so angry about it because they were backslapping each other, and they were talking about how smart they were and how smart the Mar-a-Lago team was.
Well,
And you're
most
giving it away.
disturbingly, they apparently was doing this by sending emojis to each other. That's
Yes,
what.
hearts and fire and flags.
That's, they're
The
like
fuck.
teenagers, you know. This, like who got
You
the
know,
best game
I seem to
score
recall Robert McNamara sending a lot of heart
doing
emojis.
emojis. So here's a question I have for my longtime friend, former client, fellow Mississippian, Senator Roger Wicker, chairman of the Armed Services Committee in the United States Senate.
Yeah, yeah.
When are you having a hearing about this?
I would
Because
say the
it should
19th of
be
never is the
it,
answer,
it, it
probably.
should be in the next 48 hours. Because
Yeah,
how many other people have they invited to these chats who just don't have the ethics of a Jeffrey Goldberg? And one of the most
right.
interesting things about this is when you read this piece, Jeffrey is not revealing everything that was said because he thinks it's dangerous to the assets that were and the
Correct.
intelligence
Correct.
gathering.
He's like, X person is an intelligence officer. I will not say
Yes.
their name.
So the backstop of this is the editor of the Atlantic. He's the most
Right.
responsible adult in the room. Think about
And
that.
Jeffrey is a serious person,
He's a
folks. If you
very
don't know him,
they're very
Jeffrey's a
fortunate. Yeah.
serious, thoughtful, considered person. I look at this list, and you know, J.D. Vance is on this list, and Pete Hegseth is on this list, and Tulsi Gabbard is on this list. And Tulsi Gabbard, the person she named to this deputies committee, which is a sort of a thing that happens in government when you have a big decision to make, the cabinet secretaries nominate a doobie, a guy or a girl, to take care of the details. The person Tulsi Gabbard named to this was a failed congressional candidate and complete fucking lunatic. Pete Hegseth. If this is Pete Hegseth sober, as he claimed he was going to be sober, you
Start
don't want to see
drinking.
Pete Hegseth drunk. We're going to have a nuclear Armageddon if that's the case. But all of this, Stuart, I just keep coming back to it. This didn't get out in public only because Jeffrey Goldberg said, I'm not going to either, if this is disinformation, I'm not going to publish it. If it's real, I'm really not going to publish it because it puts the country in so much danger. But, you know, Stuart, I was also thinking about this. There were over 800 hours of congressional hearings related to Hillary Clinton using a personal email server that ended up having some classified material on it. There were special prosecutors, there were Department of Justice investigations, there were, again, 800 hours of congressional committee hearings. I want to know how many people, since these people are discussing categories of classified information, and again, folks, I'm going to goon out as a former guy who had that kind of stuff, sensitive compartmentalized information discussed on non-classified systems, using their personal phones. Where were they when they were using their personal phones on this? Every personal phone in the White House is monitored constantly by a bunch of embassy intelligence gathering systems a couple of blocks away. And were they talking about these things in sensitive compartmentalized information facilities, SCIFs? You may have heard that term before. They were not. I don't know where Pete Hegseth was when he's talking about this stuff. I don't know where JD Vance was when they're talking about this stuff. I don't know where any of these people were or what they were doing or who they were around when they're discussing a classified military operation on a personal phone. It blows my
Yeah. I mean,
mind, Stuart.
your average surprise party for somebody at work is handled more sensitively. Like, and they won't know
It's
that
so true. It's
this is
so true.
happening.
I mean,
I mean, if this was an episode in The Office, they go, I don't know, is it too far? I don't
right.
really
This is
know.
like it's like this is like Tom Clancy presents Veep.
Yeah, Dr. Strangelove meets Veep.
Doctor
Um,
Strangelove meets Veep. Right.
and, it just speaks to a lack of judgment, a lack of
Completely.
seriousness, a lack of
Completely.
experience, a lack of purpose, a lack of
Yep.
dedication. And, when asked about it, some idiot in the White House said, well, this just shows how we really do all this as a group. You really
Well,
want to say that?
the other
That's
thing
really,
the other
that's
thing that's
really
going
your
on here,
response?
Stuart, that speaks to a bigger iceberg of corruption in this White House.
Yeah.
There are a couple things, folks, that when you work in government, you have to follow the law on. Federal Records Act and the Presidential Communications Act or something like that. As a federal employee, you are not allowed to just shred or get rid of or avoid the recording of non-decisional, non-draft items. So once you write a memo that's not a draft anymore, it's supposed to be archived and recorded. Happens in the White House too. They were making non-provisional, non-discretionary, non-draft decisions on a private messaging app that was set to destroy those messages after a certain period of time. They did it so they wouldn't have to comply with the Presidential Records Act. They wouldn't have to comply with Freedom of Information Act. They wouldn't have to comply with congressional subpoenas. They wouldn't have to apply not that this DOJ is going to do anything, with Department of Justice subpoenas or requests. They would say, I don't have any records that's responsive to that on my phone. Try doing that if you're a civilian under the gun of the Department of Justice. See what happens.
Yeah. Well, look, I just think that for those of us who are drawn to the Republican Party because of national security to a large degree,
Yep.
because there was Ronald Reagan standing in front of the Berlin Wall, because there was a sense that these were adults in the room. And it goes too far to say this is how we ended the Cold War, but that attitude did help in the Cold War. These
Yes.
were serious people engaged in a serious endeavor. And this is the legacy of the greatest generation. The people
Right?
who last fought in Europe and died in Europe and are buried in Europe have handed this
Mm-hmm.
legacy to these idiots, and they're just
Yep.
squandering it. So I think it just shows how important it is for all of us to speak up, not to be intimidated, to not
Yep.
allow any threats. Rick Wilson on Tesla is a very good example. Don't let them intimidate you. And how important it is for each of us to support each other and to
Yep.
support these voices. Um, so that's a plea to subscribe to Lincoln Square, subscribe to
Yep.
Rick's his podcast, Enemies List, the Lincoln Project podcast, and Rick's Substack, which is it's just astoundingly consistently good. I don't see how he
Thank you.
does it. I have about 2 weeks in me, and after that, it's like I don't know, dude. I don't have that much to say. Um, and how much
Well,
each of us needs to just be involved in this moment. We can't look
yeah.
away because that's what they want us to do.
Yeah.
So
And
let's
I
just,
also, Stuart, I thank you for that very kind words, but I also want to remind folks tomorrow we're doing a Lincoln Project town hall about how we're taking the fight and how every American can take the fight to Trump and Elon Musk right now. We're going to be talking through some tactics, some strategies for this moment and for the coming year and for 2026. We're going to have a lot of that posted up on the Lincoln Project various social media feeds. We'll post it here on the Lincoln Square social media feeds and Lincoln Square Substack, because this is a conversation, folks, we want all of you involved in. Because the number one thing people tell me every day, Stuart, I'm sure, has the same conversations with people. They don't know what to do and they're afraid. You're supposed to feel that way if you're trapped with this authoritarian BS that these guys are pushing on you. If we can do one thing for people in America, it's to help them know that there are people who are not afraid. Courage is contagious. It is the highest virtue. We hope you'll follow us into the fight. We will always be at the tip of the spear, guys. We will always take that front position. I'm either too dumb or too stubborn not to. But, Stuart and I and the rest of the team, both here at Lincoln Square and the team at the Lincoln Project, are going to keep up this fight. We hope you'll join us tomorrow on that town hall. And like you said, Stuart, it's the greatest generation that is. I can't imagine what people who stormed the beach at Normandy would say if they knew that that Dwight Eisenhower was on a chat that could have been intercepted by Adolf Hitler. I can't imagine what they would have said if they were told that we were the people we helped liberate, the Danes, and that we helped liberate, that our president would treat them as an enemy and try to take away Greenland from them. It's madness.
Well, I want to. There's another whole subject that I've been reading a lot about, Operation Market Garden.
Sure.
And another whole. We have to do a whole subject live on this, because the last time Americans were involved militarily with the Danes, it was saving them and the Danes saving us.
Right.
And there are a lot of and a lot of those were Canadians. So these two people who want to go to war now with, the Dutch and the Canadians, were at another time engaged in the great battle for freedom. And now these are the people that Donald Trump wants to invade and intimidate, try to take their countries.
Unbelievable.
Another subject, but thanks for joining us.
Thanks everybody. We'll talk.
Keep the fight.
Like I said, keep up with this town hall we're doing tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of information. See you soon.
See you guys.